Hey, what is up guys, I'm KBHD here, and this is the Oppo N1, the Cyanogenmod phone that we saw earlier this year and that I already made a video talking about. But this is the actual device, and first thing you notice is, yeah, it's huge. And I have big hands, and this phone looks huge in my hands, but that's just the first thing you notice about it. But inspired by Joshua Vergara from Android Authority, let's see how many times I can not make a "that's what she said" joke while talking about this phone. Let's go ahead and take a look at the full review. So earlier this year, Cyanogen became its own company, with its own employees and its own ideas and its own product, Cyanogenmod. And this is partially the result of its first real partnership with a company called Oppo, who kind of burst onto the scene with their Find 5. This is a very big phone with not so very big expectations, but this is a pretty interesting device nonetheless, and it has all of its quirks, and that's what we like to take a look at. But first of all, its size. It's kind of hard to give you an idea of exactly how much space this takes up in your hand when you're holding it, other than by telling you it's exactly 6.75 inches tall and 3.25 inches wide, and houses a 5.9-inch display. One thing you'll notice though when looking at the display on the front is that there is a whole lot of chin and a whole lot of bezel all around the entire top and bottom. This is more common to see on tablets, which is why this feels so much bigger than most other phones with the same size screen. I mean, there are phones that also have around a 6-inch screen that actually feel smaller than the Oppo N1 because they're lighter and they have smaller bezels. And speaking of weight, this is also a pretty heavy phone. So if you're gonna hold it with one hand, which you probably won't, but if you happen to be typing with one hand with it, it's gonna feel just a tiny bit top heavy. Again, it's not all that bad. I mean, I also have the Lumia 1520 and I've compared it against this exact phone in-house and they feel similar. But big phones like this are going to feel top heavy when you're using them with one hand. The Galaxy Note 3, on the other hand, is plastic and it's not nearly this top heavy, so there's a difference in the way it feels. But I really like this difference, and a lot of people will prefer this build quality on the N1. That's just something we can trust Oppo to get right. The Find 5 was carved around a piece of stainless steel, and the N1 feels the same way. In the build quality department, this phone crushes, and I have no doubts that it'll last a long time. Now, because this phone is so big, all of this phone's buttons and ports are on the right-hand side and the bottom, because it would be crazy to put them on the top. So the power button is on the right-hand side near the middle, and the volume rocker is below it. It's pretty easy to get used to. And on the bottom, you have your headphone jack, USB port for charging and data, and the speaker, which is actually surprisingly pretty solid. And you can tell here that this isn't the thinnest phone in the world, obviously. It's 9mm thick, but all of this rock-solid build quality and size gets you a 3,610 milliamp hour battery. That keeps this phone in operation for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes I get 7 hours of screen on time, 2 full days of use. Like, you can take this phone for a weekend and not bring your charger. Just incredible stamina on this phone with such a huge display. And a lot of this is due to the specs inside. If you take a look at the specs, it's rocking a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon 600, the Adreno 320 GPU, and of course the big, bright 5.9-inch 1080p display on the front. It handles itself pretty well for having this big display. Now, there are some unique hardware choices in this phone that you should know about. One of them is on the back. There's actually a small square touch-sensitive area in the middle, 1.5 square inches, called O-Touch. It's pretty much limited capabilities right now, but basically it acts as a little mini touchpad on the back that lets you scroll through apps in the app drawer and through the browser and tap and click things in apps, things like that. I haven't really used it much beyond just showing it off to people how cool it is that you could magically swipe through the app drawer without touching the front of the phone, and part of the reason I don't use it that much is the placement. It's just not convenient at all, and no matter what size your hands are, big or small, or no matter how you hold the phone, you're probably not going to be holding the back of the phone in any sort of way like that. The HTC One Max made the same mistake by putting the fingerprint scanner back there. It's a nice feature, it's a cool idea, but even if it's perfectly implemented, it's just too inconveniently placed to really change the way you use the phone. The only thing that I actually found it useful for was to fire the camera shutter without touching the screen. Now, of course, you can't talk about the Oppo N1 without talking about this camera here on the back, or this camera here on the front. It is a manually rotating camera. It's a 13 megapixel back-facing shooter, or you can flip it around to become a 13 megapixel front-facing selfie camera. It's so controversial because, as we all know, moving parts in any device at all tend to be the breaking point. Whenever you have a fully compact, really well integrated device like a phone or a tablet, you have almost no moving parts, and this is a massive moving part on the scale of things when you consider it. No other smartphone has anything like this right now. Is this good or bad? Honestly, it's a combination of a little bit of both right now. So Oppo says they've tested the crap out of this thing, and it seems to hold up perfectly for 100,000 rotations. And of course, that's a huge number, and we have no idea how many times you'll need to rotate this camera in your lifetime of ownership. But, let's give an example. Let's say you're a girl who loves taking selfies, or a guy, and you sit down and have a selfie portrait session every day where you rotate that camera 10 times back and forth every single session. Every day for 365 days a year, this mechanism would be guaranteed to last you for 27 years of selfies. That's a lot of selfies, and you probably won't own a phone for that long. So basically what I'm saying is I'm not too concerned about the build quality here. I'm actually just more concerned about the dust and dirt getting into that groove for someone who's less careful with their device than I am. If you don't use a case, that groove is like the perfect place for a little bit of sand or a little bit of grit from your pocket to get caught in there and leave scratches or just be really hard to clean. So far, my N1 is clean and it looks flawless. So it looks like Oppo did a great job with the design of this build. So no complaints now, but just something to keep in mind. Oh, and in terms of actual camera quality, it takes pretty great high quality photos. I mean, it's 13 megapixels, so they're looking pretty sharp. And of course, it'll take much higher than normal quality selfies if you're into that. So yeah, using this phone is very pleasant. Any phone with a big display like this is going to be amazing for media too, so watching videos constantly reminds me of that. Gaming is also really nice, though I wish the speaker was a little bit better at high volumes to enjoy movies more. But other things like moving through apps, multitasking, web browsing, and everything else you do with a high-end Android smartphone is very smooth and enjoyable on this phone. Now, my N1 is rocking a build of Cyanogenmod based on Android 4.3 right now. It'll get an update soon enough, and there are actually a few tricks in the Cyanogenmod settings specifically for this device. Things that make one-handed use easier, like the notification pull-down trick from tablets, left side swipe for notifications, right side swipe for quick settings, that's useful. There's also settings to control the capacitive menu, home, and back buttons on the bottom of the phone, how long their backlight stays on, etc. Little things like that, just stuff that makes it a very solid, complete Cyanogenmod experience. And while it doesn't at all feel like this device was built with Cyanogenmod in mind, it at least performs well with it, and I can appreciate that. Now, at the end of the day, this is the phone that we saw as the Cyanogenmod phone, but the first Oppo N1s are actually going to ship internationally with Oppo's Color ROM, which is also seen on the Oppo Find 5. The Color ROM is decent, it's alright in a lot of areas. It also makes much better use of the O-Touch area on the back of the N1, which is nice, and it's kind of a neat trick that you can use to show people, but I really don't like the aesthetic of it. I much prefer the aesthetics and the look and the functionality of something like Cyanogenmod. But luckily, the N1 is very developer friendly, so it's a matter of maybe 3 steps. It's super easy to install Cyanogenmod on any Oppo N1. But that being said, later in the year, there will be a limited edition Cyanogenmod version of this phone that comes shipped with Cyanogenmod built for this phone pre-installed. So if you like huge phones and you like stock Android, this could be what you want to go with. So definitely something to consider in the Oppo N1, and keep an eye out for that limited edition Cyanogenmod version later this year. But either way, that's been it. Thank you for watching this video review. Much more to come because I'm just finishing up final exams now, so I'm going to be steamrolling through a ton of awesome content in this last month of the year of 2013, so definitely stay tuned. So anyway, subscribe below if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.